Hi, this is Ryan Hoff with your AIC Legislative Minute for April 11th, 2025, brought to you by Xsoft. Now, normally this is more of a structured discussion, but given the fact that we're in crunch time and so many things are happening at the State House, I wanted to give you an expanded version of the Legislative Minute to go over kind of the three biggest things that we continue to work on. And it's absolutely crunch time at the State House. There's massively complex issues that are being finalized, and it's all been a little bit crazy at the State House this week, and probably will remain so for the next couple of weeks. Next week, you are going to see third reading deadline in both the House and the Senate, and then we go straight into conference committee time, which will probably wrap up April 24th is the goal. They have to be finished by the following Monday, but they'd really like to not come back after the weekend, so they're going to try to wrap up by April 24th. Now, I've already been getting loads of phone calls and emails about Senate Bill 1. This is the property tax reform and property tax relief legislation that started as the governor's tax relief proposal. The Senate made changes, and the House has absolutely made a load of changes, a lot related to the property tax reform measures that we have talked about over the last 18 months, really, but also including some property tax relief measures as well. Now, this appears to have reached agreement from all three parties, the House, the Senate, and the governor's office, based on their public comments. So we do expect the Senate to concur on the House changes that were made this week and voted on and passed out of the House this week. It'll be we expect it to be concurred on in the Senate next week, and then go to the governor's office for signature. Now, as I said, complex is the name of the game here, and I'm going to hit some of the big picture items that are in the bill that passed the House. And as I mentioned, the tax relief and tax reform measures are kind of intertwined, so I'll go through those kind of quickly. Now, remember, all of these things are going to be discussed in detail at our district meetings, which start in less than a month. So I will mention those again at the end of the video here. But the tax relief and tax reform measures are intertwined. It starts with a homestead deduction of 2/3 and a 1/3 ag deduction and other 2% cap bucket properties, so apartments and so forth. And then you also have the 3% that there is no deduction. But there is a business personal property tax floor phase out for new equipment that goes into operation this year. So already from January forward, any new equipment that went into place this year, there is a phase out of the business personal property tax 30% depreciation floor. In addition to removing the floor, there is a vastly expanded, what used to be called the de minimis business personal property tax exemption. In current law is $80,000 if a business personal property tax payer owns less than $80,000 total acquisition cost of business personal property. That is exempt under current law. Going forward, starting pay next year, that exemption jumps all the way up to $1 million. And then the following year, it's $2 million. So north of 90% of all business personal property tax filers in the state are going to be exempt going forward. And that, of course, anytime you take chunks of the property tax base out of the system, rates go up. Also, the max levy growth quotient for 2026 is capped at 4%, and a new formula will be installed going forward. That's currently a rolling average of growth in income growth for Hoosiers. Going forward, they will be adding new data points into that calculation. So there will continue to be a max levy growth quotient, but it will be calculated differently. Also, going forward, there will be no excess levy appeals based on AV growth. Only growth through annexations or emergencies would be allowed for an excess levy appeal. The current over 65, disabled, and veterans deductions, which again, because they're a deduction, they would typically shift onto other taxpayers, but those become credits in this bill. So that's just lost revenue to the units. Speaking of credits, there's also a new 10% credit on homestead taxes. So you calculate the bill and then a 10% credit on what is calculated, capped at $300. So again, more homestead property tax relief there. For the next 2 years, there will be a new ag rate calculation to lower ag values, again, only for the next 2 years. Now, moving into the reform aspect, we've, again, for the last 18 months or so, talked a lot about the stacking of lit rates. This concept has been discussed for a few years now, and now they are on the brink of putting it into law, where the county fiscal body becomes the adopting authority for all county-wide local income tax rates. There would be no distribution of the base rate for the counties, because cities and towns over 3,500 population would have their own authority for their own local income tax rate. So that up to 1.2 for cities would stack on top of a county-wide lit rate. The county expenditure rate would be capped at 1.2. There would also be an option for a 0.2 for non-municipal units to distribute to units like libraries or townships or schools. Again, at the discretion of the county fiscal body. There would also be 0.4 for fire and EMS. There is a formula on how that would be distributed to service providers. There would also be a 1.2 that the county could adopt to distribute to other cities and towns who do not have their own lit rate or lit authority. That would be collected only on payers who are outside the cities that are already allowed to have their own lit rate. So again, complex is the name of the game. Also, the legislation expires current property tax relief rates through lit and levy freeze rates through lit. So if your county has one of those two mechanisms, that's going to change things quite a bit differently for you. Those would go away. There is new in this legislation a 0.3 only for the next 3 years to buy down property tax with a local income tax, but that only applies to the county property tax rate, not all of the other units as well. Now, some other tidbits that are in Senate Bill 1 include a change to the lit reserve accounts. Those change into lit holding accounts, and there's a whole lot of fundamental change going on there. Also, there is a county option property tax deferral program where an individual, if the county adopts this program, can request to have up to, I think it's $500 a year deferred from their property tax, only if lien holders agree to it. If that person has a mortgage, for example, their bank would have to agree to allow that. Also, fire territories and conservancy districts would have a new maximum rate of 40 cents. That's for any of those territories and districts established as after January 1st of this year. Also, there is change to general obligation bond issuance, and there would be a 1-year cooling off delay so that you couldn't issue those bonds year after year. In total, homesteads receive about $400 million, give or take, in relief over the next 3 years, shifted largely onto commercial real properties. The cost to counties is about $100 million less next year than counties otherwise would have received under existing law. So it's, as the legislature likes to say, a reduction in the increase. You won't be collecting as much as you would have, but for most counties, you would be collecting more than you did in previous years. Now, again, places where you have like levy freeze rates, property tax relief rates, and so stuff like that, that might impact you differently. And then looking forward into like 2028, counties would be getting about $200 million less a year as the business personal property tax depreciation floor really starts to kick in. So for all local units, that's about $400 million less revenue in 26 and 27, then jumping to nearly $700 million less in revenue in 28, again, as the business personal property changes really start to kick in. And it's the legislature's intent that any revenue loss be made up through local income taxes. Moving on, away from Senate Bill 1, we also saw the Senate version of the state budget this week. It funds community mental health at $100 million over the biennium. It funds the Health First local public health funding at $100 million per year over the biennium. So in 2025, that was 150. The year prior, it was only 75. So it's 200 over the bienniums. But so we're glad to see that continue to be funded. Now it does come with a couple changes to it. 90% of that money would have to be used for core public health services, and it requires funds to only be used for Indiana residents who are legal citizens. Also, the Senate version of the budget increases the sheriff per diem to $42 a day. That's up from $37. So happy to see that increase. And we're also keeping an eye on the potential for assistance and reimbursement from the state for some of the county prosecutors' expenses, and whether we can get that into the budget as well. Also, the Senate version of the road funding bill, House Bill 1461, was adopted this week in Appropriations Committee. There are significant changes to the community crossings program. I won't get into all the details, but it splits the current fund into two parts. There would continue to be a grant program of about $100 million, and after some other distributions to the local tracks program and to Marion County, the remainder of the fund would become a direct distribution based on a formula, and that formula is on lane mileage. And at first glance, you might think, well, lane mileage benefits large cities. Well, it does, but it dramatically benefits counties, because you can think of the thousands and thousands of lane miles in rural Indiana where the cities, you may not have any cities that have 2-lane streets. So based on lane mileage, counties get nearly 80% of that. And that's a dramatic increase from what counties have been receiving out of the grant program that is distributed to all units, regardless of how much infrastructure responsibility they have. So within this 1461, as it sits today, there's no wheel tax requirement for the grant part of community crossings, but there would need to be at least a basic wheel tax for the direct distribution part, the second part based on lane mileage. Also, the bill today includes an increased surcharge for electric vehicles and hybrids, and also includes an increased speed limit on 465 here in Indianapolis. So those are just kind of a brief look at the complexity of the three main bills that we are working on right now. There's still a lot of stuff we're working on related to investment of CDs, local depositories, keeping our eye on renewable energy. There's still a lot going on left to be decided before the end of session. But be sure to sign up for our district meetings to hear all the details on these and all the bills that we've been following on your behalf. The district meetings, as I said, are less than a month away, so be sure to look at indianacounties.org for information and registration information to find out when your district meeting will be held and where. Conference committee time is almost upon us. Things can change by the minute. And as always, if there are significant changes that require member feedback to our legislators, we will alert you across all of our outlets. And like they say, it's not over until it's over. So this has been the Legislative Minute brought to you by Xsoft.